Now, I wanted to mention something about opportunism, and that has a lot to do with the cerveza behind me and the cafe con leche over there and everything else. So, one of the things about civil war, uh, any kind of conflict really, is you have opportunists. I think the book talks about, and this is really interesting. I'll ask a discussion question on the Chechen rebels, how, they started getting into hostage taking, um, among other horrible things. And I hate to say it, sexual assaults, kidnapping, etc., where you begin to fight the good fight, right? The Chechen rebels wanted to be independent. And then they start, realizing, well, there's other things to be had. Same thing with the Somalian pirates. The original Somalian pirates were actually protecting the area of being poached with fishing. Other countries, particularly European countries, were going off the coast of Somalia and taking all their fish. So the pirates started putting pressure on those people, right, in order to get, a piece of the action, in order to scare them away, to push them away from their coast. I've seen this when I lived in Nicaragua. Japan ships used to like blow up areas, and then the fish would rise to the top, and that was terrible for the local fishermen and the coral reef. So, things just don't happen for a reason. But then the other Somali pirates, the ones that become really brutal, start saying, hey, let's get a piece of this action, so it becomes more mafia-esque, etc. And then the coordinated attacks and other things, the destruction that Tilly talks about in that chapter, begin to escalate. And there you see why a lot of the times violence gets worse. So with the FARC, some of these people during the peace process, which we'll get into in the second half of the course, really, some people said, I'm going back to fighting. I'm not going to stop this fighting because, one, I'm not just going to get a job at IBM, right? You know what I mean? I'm a guerrilla, I'm a guerrillero. I feel more comfortable out there, but also some started kind of benefiting from the cocoa trade and, kidnapping and other ways to make money. Now, some did have legitimate concerns about the peace process in and of itself. Some were getting killed when they went back into society, etc. But a lot of opportunism arises in conflict. And then that makes it more difficult for the conflict in and of itself to stop. And this opportunism, you're going to see it in the movie and stuff that, a lot of these people in the military, they become prestigious. They make decent salaries. Some people, after they retire, they get, jubilado, and they do really, really well. These are people, I'm kind of giving you a broad spectrum of notable cases where, they end up kidnapping, they end up, unfortunately, sexually assaulting people, they end up getting into the cocaine trade, basically, with the coca leaves. They end up getting into smuggling, doing things in border towns. A lot of these like guerrilla wars start developing in border towns. So it's very difficult because then they get involved in the smuggling of people, of other things across borders. So when conflict arises, it opens space for even more conflict, political violence, in the form of this kind of opportunism. And sometimes opportunism just isn't that, it's selling weapons, it's becoming kind of a cult leader like that. Coney guy in the Lord's Resistant Army, which Tilly talks about as well. So these things are very, very important to understand, that a whole range of opportunism comes. And with the FARC, some people stayed with fighting because, they were actually making money from it. It became kind of part of their life. And that becomes problematic too, because when you do start to engage in conflict resolution strategies, people don't want to leave because this is the life they know and they're making money and other things. In fact, I never leave my lectures, but I do think I have that beer. Yes, I have the beer. Look at that. Ooh, you can't really see well because it sees through it. But let's see. This one is the La Trocha that's behind me. And this one is Cerveza Artesanal. Now, why am I showing these? because I'm an alcoholic? No. Basically, I'm showing you these because these are, as we'll see, and if you have had me before, in order to get FARC soldiers, those are the Colombian guerrilleros that went into the peace process and got reincorporated into society. They started making products so they could kind of eke out a decent living so they didn't have to go back to fighting. This is a little place that they opened up. And I went to in Colombia, got 2 beers as memory, right? I'm not double fisting alcoholic, okay? I actually drank them then, but I brought them back as souvenirs to remind me of how we can create peace in political violence. But what's interesting about it is the question is, why do some people stay, right? And opportunism that Tilly talks about is actually a pretty interesting concept that can be applicable to why not only conflicts last a long time, but also why, they begin to get even more violent, because then more opportunists come in and start wanting to smuggle people, smuggle drugs, do this, do that, because conflict opens up space for these opportunists. And it's not just they're bad people, right? It may be, they're poor, they've always been poor, and they see this as a way in order to have a better life, and this is the only way. But this is very, very important for violence, conflict, and human rights. And there's actually nothing in here, so I'm not drunk or anything like that. I don't think I just drank it, but yeah. And this is incredibly important. And I've had the lucky experience of having to actually been in some of these war-torn areas from Nicaragua, Colombia, and other places to kind of study it with on the ground, Calivas-esque on the ground experience. So take care, everyone, and we will talk to you soon and see each other soon.